Hey, I'm Scott, and this course is all about things that I wish I knew on stage when I was learning about live music production. And a lot of this is about how audio and music work together, so I think this is really important stuff for both musicians and technicians. First, we'll look at frequency and listen to some audio examples. Then, we'll look at inputs, which include microphones and DIs. And we'll look at different audio connectors we use on stage and see if they're balanced or unbalanced. We'll discuss monitors, both wedges and IEMs. And finally, we'll look at the very important concept of the signal chain. And if you're interested in exploring anything else related to live music and touring, go to theproductionacademy.com. We have a ton of great resources for all levels of expertise. In this video, we discuss frequency. This is one of the building blocks of music and is something we talk about all the time in live sound. First, we'll explain how sound is waves in the air. Then, we'll talk about frequency, which is the number of cycles per second. And finally, we'll learn how human hearing is divided into 5 frequency ranges, from low to high, as well as listen to some music examples. Let's begin. In audio systems, speakers create sound waves. When these waves hit our ear, they vibrate the eardrum, which is how we hear sound. We use the term frequency to describe how fast a wave cycles. A low frequency will cycle slower than a high frequency. We measure this in hertz, which is the number of cycles per second. The range of human hearing is approximately 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. That's 20 cycles per second, all the way to 20,000 cycles per second. When we're talking about music, we can split this frequency spectrum into 5 ranges: lows, low mids, mids, high mids, and highs. The best way to know what these sound like is to actually hear them, so we're going to listen to the same piece of music 5 times. Each time we play it, we'll listen to a different part of the frequency spectrum. First, let's listen to the music as is, with the full frequency spectrum.
So the saying says, an elephant never forgets, standing in the concrete gets away inside and say.
So now let's hear just the lows, which are 20 to 100 hertz. These frequencies are also called the bass, and you could describe them as being boomy. You may not be able to hear these frequencies on computer or phone speakers, so we recommend headphones to listen to these examples. Above the lows are the low-mid frequencies. They range from 100 to 500 hertz. These frequencies are described as sounding muddy or hollow. In the middle of the frequency spectrum are the mids. In our example here, they range from 500 hertz to 2000 hertz. These frequencies are described as sounding boxy or nasal.
So the saying says, an elephant never forgets, standing in the concrete gets away inside and say.
Above the mids are the high mids. These range from 2K to 5K and generally are the frequencies people call harsh.
So the saying says, an elephant never forgets, standing in the concrete gets away inside and say.
And one thing to note, in audio terms, when frequencies enter the thousands of hertz, they are shortened to kilohertz, or most often to just K. So, 2000 hertz is the same as 2K. At the top of the frequency spectrum are the highs. These range from 5K to 20K. Remember, 5K is 5 kilohertz, which is 5,000 hertz. In consumer electronics, the high frequencies are called treble, and they're described as bright.
So the saying says, an elephant
So, as you listen to these examples, you might have noticed how certain instruments stand out in each of the frequency ranges. This is something good audio engineers think about when mixing. We'll discuss this, along with more mixing tips, in other videos. To review, sound is simply waves in the air, and frequency is the number of waves per second. And we listen to 5 frequency ranges from low to high. In this video, we talk about inputs, which are the microphones and DIs we have on stage. These are the sounds that go into the mixer, which we also call a console or soundboard. First, we'll discuss microphones and the difference between dynamic and condenser. Then, we'll look at DIs and how they can be passive or active. And then, we'll see how ground lifts and pads are extra features we find on DIs. Microphones serve one basic purpose. They take a sound, turn it into an electrical signal, and then send it to a mixer. Almost all microphones in live sound are one of 2 types, dynamic or condenser. Dynamic mics are great for live music because they're generally pretty rugged and they tend to be a little more affordable than condenser mics. The Shure SM57 and 58 are the most famous dynamic mics, and you'll see them all around the world. They can be used on any instrument, horns, drums, guitar and keyboard amps, and of course, vocals. The Sennheiser E602 and Audix D6 are dynamic mics that are made to pick up a lot of low frequencies. You could use them with kick drums, bass guitar amps, tubas, or any other instrument that sits in the low part of the frequency spectrum. Condenser mics are a little different than dynamics. They sound smoother and are a little more sensitive, but they also tend to be more expensive and fragile. Condensers also need phantom power. This is 48 volts sent through the mic cable and is turned on with a button on the console, usually marked something like plus 48 or 48V. 2 common condenser mics are the Shure SM81 and AKG 414. Just like dynamics, they can be used for any instrument, but you'll typically see them on cymbals, strings, and other acoustic instruments. Their sensitivity will help pick up some extra sonic detail. For this reason, some condenser mics are made specifically for vocals. The Neumann KMS 105 is a high-quality vocal mic designed for live music. So, we use a microphone to get an acoustic sound into the mixer, but that won't work for bass, keyboard, or other electronic instruments. We could send the instrument through an amplifier and put a microphone on it. Or we could use a DI. This takes the signal and sends it directly to the console. You can also use a mic and a DI. The DI sends the signal to the console, but the signal is also directly split to the amplifier. This way, the bass player can have control of the amplifier and the engineer can have a clean signal coming to the console. Many people run electric bass this way and blend the mic and DI for the front of house mix. There are 2 types of DIs, passive and active. Just like condenser mics, active DIs need phantom power, although some can be run on batteries. Active DIs do tend to be more expensive than passive DIs, but this doesn't mean they're better for every situation. The low frequencies of active DIs are usually smoother and deeper, so many people use them for bass guitars or other instruments with low frequencies. But some people like to use passive DIs exclusively. They can have a warmer sound, while active DIs tend to sound cleaner. But really, either can be used for any instrument, and what you use is up to personal preference. There are 2 common features that most DIs have, a pad and a ground lift. Some line level sources, like keyboards, can easily clip an active DI, or end up being really hot when they hit the console. A pad cuts the signal, which can help keep it at a good level. Sometimes you'll get a buzz when you use a DI. This is caused by a ground loop. Let's listen to what this sounds like. Flipping the ground switch on the DI will hopefully break the ground loop and send a clean signal to the console. To recap, we looked at microphones, DIs, and a couple extra features we find on DIs. In this video, we're going to look at some audio connectors that we use to put on a show. First, we'll talk about unbalanced and balanced and how the connectors are different for each. Then, we'll look at a few connectors and how they are used on stage. Finally, we'll cover speaker cables and how they are not instrument cables. These are some of the connectors we use for audio. They connect iPods, mics and DIs, line level signals, and speakers. When we use them, it's important to know if they're unbalanced or balanced. To best explain the difference between them, let's look at TS and TRS connectors. TS has two connections, tip and sleeve. TRS has three connections, tip, ring, and sleeve. This is a critical difference. Unbalanced audio needs two connections, and balanced audio needs three. However, the real difference for us on stage is how long we can run these signals. An unbalanced signal can only be run for about 20 feet before we start to lose quality. But balanced signals can go for hundreds of feet without issues. The most common unbalanced cables we use are TS, which in America we call quarter-inch or instrument cables. In the UK, they're called jack leads, and in Australia, they're called jack-to-jacks. RCA is another common unbalanced connector. With live music, you typically only see these with a DJ setup or with music playback like a CD. If you need to run the signal a long way, you can use RCA to quarter-inch cables to plug into a DI. Or you could plug into a DI that already has RCA inputs. The most common cable on stage is XLR, which is also just called a mic cable. This is a balanced cable, and its main purpose is to connect microphones and DIs to the audio system, but can also be used to connect line-level devices like DJ mixers, keyboards, and computer interfaces. 1/8-inch connectors on iPod cables are a little different. They look like a mini TRS, which we know uses 3 connections to carry a balanced mono signal. But this is for an unbalanced stereo signal. The tip carries the left, the ring carries the right, and they share the sleeve. This can break out to quarter-inch, XLR, or even RCA. The most common speaker connectors we see are NL4 and quarter-inch. NL4, which can also be called speak-on, is the modern standard for speaker connections. All professional systems use NL4, and many speaker cabinets for instruments have started using them too. However, there are plenty of situations where you'll find a quarter-inch instead. Even though quarter-inch connectors are used on both instruments and speakers, the cabling is different and not interchangeable. Instead of a signal wire and a shield, speaker cable has 2 wires which carry positive and negative currents that drive a speaker back and forth. It's important to know what you need and get the appropriate cable, or else you can possibly damage equipment. To review, we talked about unbalanced and balanced, we looked at a few connectors, and we discussed speaker cable. In this video, we're going to talk about monitors, which is how you hear yourself on stage. This has changed drastically over time, and modern technology has brought studio quality mixes to live performances. First, we'll discuss wedges, which are speakers on stage. Then, we'll learn how side fills and subs are additional speakers for monitors. And finally, we'll cover how a separate monitor console can be added to mix the monitors. Hearing yourself on stage is obviously important. The traditional way to do this is with speakers that sit on the stage, called wedges. These can be given to each performer, and depending on the audio setup, can have a dedicated mix for each one. So, someone standing on one side of the stage can have something different in their wedge than someone on the other side. Sometimes we have speakers on the side of the stage facing in. These are called side fills and tend to be larger and have subs for the low frequencies. Some musicians also need extra low end in their mix, so they'll take a sub in addition to their wedge. This can help drummers hear their kick drum or DJs hear the low end of their stereo mix. Sometimes we use a separate monitor console to mix the monitors. So, even though the front of house console still controls the main speakers, a dedicated monitor engineer and console control the mixes for the stage. It goes next to the stage so the engineer can easily communicate with the performers. Having two consoles lets the front of house and monitor engineers adjust their settings without affecting each other. In modern touring, many professional musicians use IEMs, which stands for in-ear monitors. Sometimes we just call them in-ears. These can give you a high-quality stereo mix that offers more detail than wedges can. Plus, they can operate wirelessly to offer more freedom of movement. IEMs can also be custom molded to your ears, which is done with an ear impression taken by an audiologist. The quality of IEMs can vary greatly, and so can the price. These UE5s by Ultimate Ears have two drivers, which are tiny speakers, in each ear. They retail for about $600, but that doesn't necessarily include the cost of impressions, which can be around $100. These Jerry Harvey JH11s have 4 drivers per side. There's an extra driver for the low end, which gives them some extra punch. They go for $900 even without the impressions. When you get into flagship models, the cost can quickly get past $1,500 or even $2,000. Of course, the price of custom in-ears isn't really justified for everyone. If you don't want to buy custom molds, you can just use generic earbuds. These Shure 215s deliver some of the benefits of custom in-ears and go for about $100. There are many options out there, but most of all you want something comfortable that won't pop out in the middle of a show. In this video, we looked at wedges, how a separate monitor console can mix the monitors, and covered some topics on IEMs.
I like the more sort of immersive experience, like the full body experience, rather than it just being right in here. It makes me feel disconnected, like we're all alone together on stage. Having the sound just coming directly into your ear instead of from the place it is, like on the stage, is really disorienting.
It's totally awesome for a drummer to have in-ear monitors. I feel like my ears now are taking a far less of a beating than they were before because I can have the mix that I want, but at the level that I want it at. Everything's kind of contained, and you can play a little more controlled.
In this video, we discussed the signal chain. This is how all audio signals flow from one place to the next, like from a microphone all the way to the main speakers. First, we'll see how a signal chain is made up of audio gear and cables. Then, I'll talk about how a broken signal chain means no sound will pass. And we'll discuss the best way to troubleshoot, which is to follow the signal chain. Audio signal travels from one piece of gear to another in a specific order. Ultimately, for live music, the goal is to have it heard by the audience through speakers, but it's good to understand that all the gear along the way affects the audio. Even the cables that connect to each piece of gear have a small effect on the signal, and things like EQ can drastically change the sound. When thinking about all the pieces together, we have what we call a signal chain. And I talk a lot about this in the How to Use a Mixer course, but a signal chain is one of the fundamental concepts in audio. For a signal to get from the source all the way to the speaker at the end, each part of the signal chain must be connected properly. If we end up breaking the chain at any point, no signal will get past and you won't hear anything. This could be an entire piece of gear failing, but more often than not, it's a broken cable. Since cables are coiled up after every show, they have a lot of wear and tear that can eventually cause them to break. But still, if you have a problem, the best way to troubleshoot is to go through the signal chain from one end to the other. For instance, let's look through a stage setup. Say you're playing a keyboard and don't have an amplifier. You'd probably use a wedge to hear yourself, which is controlled by the sound engineer. So the signal starts at the keyboard, goes into a DI, goes to the mixer, and then is sent back to the wedge by the engineer. If this isn't working, you'll have to figure out which part of the signal chain is broken. First, since there's no sound at the wedge, we'd look at the next part of the chain, which is the mixer. If there's no signal at the mixer, then you'd look at the next thing, which is the XLR cable between the DI and the mixer. If that doesn't work, you'd change the DI itself. If still nothing, then you'd check the instrument cable between the keyboard and the DI. and then finally the keyboard itself. Once you've done enough shows, you start to know what common problems are, and you can make educated guesses without going through the entire signal chain piece by piece. But it's still critical to understand how the entire signal chain is connected, so you can troubleshoot quickly and hopefully not be stuck at a show without being able to fix a problem. So we talked about the signal chain, how it can be broken, and how to troubleshoot an audio problem.